What mattered most to us was that our bass player, Simon, wasn't there. I've played The Cure maybe 3 times in the last 15 years, but this is the first time I've played there. Robert Smith was one of a kind in the history of rock music. Robert is not only the face of The Cure, but also the soul of a whole lost age. He has tangled hair, dark circles under his eyes, and a voice that sounds like it came from a bad dream. People whose minds never found a place in this noisy world listen to songs like Boys Don't Cry, Love Song, and Disintegration. Over 30 million albums have been sold by The Cure around the world, and their 2018 Hyde Park concert marking their 40th anniversary made 65,000 people cry under the stage lights. Most people call Robert Smith the Goth King and the pioneer of post-punk and alternative rock. But he chooses to live a quiet life, free of scandal, without kids, and without noise, as if fame was never his goal. There was an artist who was kicked out of high school for having too much influence, who got into fights behind the scenes during a European tour, and who was once thought to be racist because of the name of a song. Although he is getting close to 70 years old, he is still the man who has been with his first love for more than 50 years, never left The Cure, and is still on stage. Sad music can be found in the life of Robert Smith. It is deep, hazy, quiet, and beautiful in a way that a flashlight can't show. How did a kid who was once bullied for being different become a cultural icon around the world? Who is behind the smudged lipstick, wild hair, and dreamy eyes? How about we watch this video and find out? Beginnings. Robert Smith was born in Blackpool in 1959, but he and his family moved around a lot as a child. His family moved around a lot, from Blackpool to Horley, before settling down in Crawley, West Sussex. This is the town that would become the first place where The Cure was developed. Robert grew up in small houses with long hallways and rainy nights in the south of England. He was a quiet boy who liked to hide in his room and spin vinyl records to block out the world. Not really poor, but also not very rich either. Alex Smith was his father. He had been in the Navy and had a deep, warm voice that he often sang to his kids at night, and Robert learned the first tunes from him without even realizing it. Rita, his mom, played the piano and thought that music was the only thing that could help her kids find their way in a world that was becoming less interesting. They never made their kids do anything against their will. Instead, they always let them play and sing as long as it made them happy. Robert was the middle child of 4. Among his family, he wasn't the most interesting. His sister Janet, who was known as the piano prodigy, was that. Their mother had taught them music when they were very young. Instead, Janet was the one who pushed Robert in a different way by accident. It was important for him to have his own voice, so he picked up the guitar. There was no way I could follow my sister's path because she was too good. What I picked was the guitar, which can scream without saying a word. During his school years, Robert often went against strict rules. In the 1970s, wearing a black silk skirt to school was seen as inappropriate, so he was hit after class. Teachers said it was just a rebellious phase, but his friends made fun of him and thought he should be punished. Robert didn't change because of those things. They only pushed him deeper into music, which became his only safe place, and made him withdraw even more. Robert and his band Malice, which was a forerunner of The Cure, played at the school's Christmas event in 1976 while he was a student at St. Wilfrid's Comprehensive. The show did better than anyone thought it would, but the administration chose to suspend him because they said he was a bad influence on other students. He was kicked out of a place that was meant to teach kids how to be themselves. Robert could have given up, but he sat down and wrote his first songs. I don't rely on sight when I play. I write when I'm alone. It wasn't a tragic childhood in the usual sense, but the way people treated him as an odd child and the way his family stood by him, without saying a word, made him the perfect outsider, someone strong enough to turn his sadness into music that people all over the world could relate to. Beginners in their careers. Robert Smith never went back to school after being suspended in 1976 for playing with the band Malice. He picked music because it was the only viable option, not because it was the obvious choice. Robert started Easy Cure with childhood friends Lowell Tolhurst, Michael Dempsey, and Paul Thompson. It is a rock band with cold tones, experimental sounds, and ideas from French philosophy and post-punk. Later, the long name was shortened to The Cure. It's a simple name that has a lot of meaning. Music as a cure for loneliness, pain, and being lost. Fiction Records signed The Cure in 1978. Even though he was only 19, Robert was already the creative head, lead singer, and person who chose the band's look. Killing an Arab, The Cure's first song, caused a lot of trouble right away. The song, which was based on Albert Camus' The Stranger, was an intellectual allegory for how pointless and silly violence is. But the title was easy to get wrong. Robert Smith had to say over and over that the song was never meant to be racist for years. I would have chosen a different name if I knew that was how it would be taken. But sometimes, the things that are most honest are also the ones that are most changed. In 1979, they released their first record, Three Imaginary Boys. It was a mix of different feelings, such as boredom, sarcasm, and emptiness, all of which were shown through Robert's distant voice and signature icy guitar playing. Nevertheless, that was just the start. Robert led The Cure deeper into the darkness of the human soul with 17, 1980, Faith, 1981, and then Pornography, 1982. There, sadness didn't need an explanation, and death and meaninglessness seemed like natural parts of life. It was more than just a record. It turned out to be a nightmare. As the meetings went on, Robert felt more and more hopeless. He finally admitted that he had written Pornography because he wasn't sure if he would still be living afterward. The band was on the verge of genius and destruction as they became more and more involved with drugs, alcohol, and their own growing anger. The tour of 1982 finished with a punch. Backstage in Strasbourg, Robert Smith and Simon Gallup got into a fight, which caused the band to break up for a while. Their friendship was over because of stress, disagreements, and long nights. The Cure looked like they were done after only 3 records. It was a mess, but Robert didn't give up on music. After playing guitar for Susie and the Banshees, he and Steven Severin started a side project called The Glove. These side trips not only helped him emotionally get better, but they also made him more creative, which would later help The Cure come out of their own shadow. And when Robert went back to the Fix in 1983, he wasn't just a lonely, tired, but clear-headed guitarist. As a guitarist, he had lived through the songs he wrote, and he was about to write the best parts of his career from that mess. Achievement in your career. When Robert Smith went back to the Fix in 1984, he found himself standing alone among the broken pieces of past fights. A lot of friends and teammates were gone. The group's picture was broken up, but he didn't go back. Instead, he went forward and put together all the broken pieces to make a new Cure. It was stronger, more passionate, and big enough to hold all the pain he had never spoken out loud. 1985's Head on the Door was the first sign of things to change. It was still dark and scary, but Robert's music sounded beautiful for the first time. With its happy tune and sad words, In Between Days paved a new way, making pain into music that you could dance to. People in the US started to notice the band, and they went on trips around the world and climbed the charts beyond the Gothic underground scene. However, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, 1987, a bold, sprawling double record with a lot of different styles, was the real masterpiece. From funk to ballad, shrieking guitars to whispery singing, Robert made a musical feast that was just as crazy as he was feeling. The record became a huge hit and put The Cure on the map around the world. The song Just Like Heaven was a huge hit. It was about love and loss, and the sound made you feel like you were both falling apart and flying. What followed was the start of a masterpiece. Robert released Disintegration in 1989. He wrote it when he was 29 years old, and it made him feel like time was pushing him to the edge. He said, "I thought I was going to die at 30, so I wrote this album as a farewell." The album Disintegration wasn't just a bunch of songs. It was a trip. Picture of You is about how lonely it is. Plain Song is about how hopeless things seem. And Love Song is about how much love hurts. The record did well on the Billboard charts and sold more than 3 million copies. It is still one of the most complete statements in popular music about love, death, and losing one's ego. The best years for Robert Smith and The Cure were without a doubt 1989 to 1992. People all over the world bought tickets to the Prayer Tour, and Robert's picture became a pop culture icon. It was on MTV and Rolling Stone, and everyone knew him as the face of gothic rock. Surprisingly, though, Robert pulled away more as he became more famous. He did not buy fancy homes, seek fame, or turn The Cure into a brand that could be sold. In the early 1990s, rock music was becoming more and more commercialized, but Robert Smith stuck to one concept. For him, writing music was only a way to express himself. That's why what he wrote always touched people at their deepest level, everyday life. In the world of rock, where chaos, short-lived relationships, scandals, and parties never end, Robert Smith has always been different. His one-woman relationship was always clear. Bobby met Mary Poole at St. Wilfrid School in Crowley when he was only 13 years old, and they have been together ever since. It took them a while to fall in love. They first became friends and kept in touch as they went through different stages of growing up. While Robert's band's members were always switching up, he was kicked out of school and hit for wearing a silk skirt. Mary stayed still, didn't say anything, and didn't leave. They started dating in 1976, the same year The Fix was created, and were together for more than 10 years before getting married in 1988. They deliberately chose not to have children, not because they couldn't. Robert used to say, "I can't imagine having a child while I'm still figuring out how to live in this world." This time, he decided to love Mary with all of his writing. Love Song, the most beautiful love song by The Cure, was written just for her. A promise that will always stand made during those endless trips. No incidents involving cheating that marriages have been ruined by fame. No bad feelings after getting drunk. He was just a man who always came home to the woman who sat and watched him play guitar when he was 15. Despite love, Robert Smith's life was still pretty difficult. He's dealt with depressions that don't have names, worry, insomnia, and the feeling of being an outsider among other outsiders. He almost never showed up in public, only showing up in workshops or on stage, where he could scream without anyone asking him why. Robert has never been comfortable in the spotlight. He was only there because the music made him. Beyond the surface, what he loved was always there. Something quiet, a cup of tea late at night, and drafts that aren't quite finished if The Cure is a trip. Mary is the only person who has always been on the right path. Robert Smith never got lost in the waves of his own weather because he always had a place to go back to. Individuals, not a spot. There is disagreement, chaos, and conflict. The Cure is one of the few bands that has been around for almost 50 years and has never been involved in drugs, arrests, or sex problems. However, that doesn't mean Robert Smith's trip was smooth. He didn't say much or explain himself in public, which led to some mistakes and sometimes bad decisions. The battle started right in the band, where it was most likely to happen. During the Pornography tour in 1982, Robert Smith and bassist Simon Gallup got so angry at each other that they fought backstage in Strasbourg. It wasn't just a fight over the set list or the volume of the music. After months of mental stress, tight schedules, and the clashing of two strong artistic egos, it all came together. Unfortunately, The Fix almost didn't work. Robert quit the band for a while, and they didn't play for a year. The second break came from Lowell Tolhurst, another old friend. Robert's friend from childhood, co-founder of the band, used to play keyboards and then switched to drums. After the collapse, Robert had to make the hard choice to fire Tolhurst because his alcoholism was getting worse and hurting their job and the environment where they worked. It was a choice that hurt me deeply. Robert knew more than anyone how painful it was to lose someone who had been there for him since they were a child. He had to choose between staying true to the past and making sure the band would stay together. There weren't always accidents from the inside. From their first song, Killing an Arab, in 1978, Robert Smith was given a name he didn't want. The song was an intellectual allegory about how silly life is, based on Albert Camus' book The Stranger. But the book's name, in a politically sensitive world, was quickly taken the wrong way and seen as racist. Worse, radical groups used the wrong quote from it. Robert got a lot of negative feedback, so he had to make official comments denying any ties to hate groups. Later releases included disclaimers that explained where the song's ideas came from in literature. He said, "I never wrote music to hurt anyone. If I had known, I would have given it a different name." He's saying sorry for something he never meant to do. Many years later, Robert is still a controversial figure among some reviewers. Some people say that he's weird to get attention, saying that the black clothes, smudged makeup, and wild hair were all just ways to market himself. But they forget. That's how Robert Smith looked when he was 16, before he had any contracts, shows, or became famous. That it wasn't a plan. It was his nature. In his recent autobiography, Blink 182, Mark Hoppus made fun of the time Robert Smith tried to kiss me at a party after their Wembley show in February 2004. This led to one of the most recent mistakes. People told the story in a friendly way, but it still caused a stir in the news. Robert did not answer. He might be sick of hearing people talk about him when they don't know him. Robert Smith has been at the heart of arguments for more than 40 years. It's not that he wants to be, but because he's an artist who won't bend to please the crowd. He would rather fight with his best friend, lose a record deal, or be thought of in a bad way than change who he is. He may still be here under the stage lights with his guitar and songs that have never stopped bothering people because of how determined he is. Legacy and power. Although Robert Smith didn't create gothic rock, he made it famous. With smudged lipstick, a distant look, and sad melodies, Robert changed the way music could sound. It didn't have to scream to be powerful or be dark to feel cold. Though he never said he was part of a movement, a whole generation of teens dressed in black wrote diaries with lines from Disintegration and saw The Cure as their only friend who would really listen. It's not just dark rock that Robert Smith has influenced. He set a standard for artists who weren't afraid to be personally honest and didn't try to look cool or rebellious in order to get attention. Many musicians, including Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Placebo, Interpol, and even Billie Eilish, say that Robert's music and spirit have influenced them a lot. Robert also changed the way artists write songs so that they see them not as a product to be eaten, but as a way to heal themselves. It was his opinion that music shouldn't be sold. Making music is what keeps me going. The Cure became a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in February 2019. A reporter asked Robert if he was excited during the event, and he said, "Not as much as you do." The answer, which was cutting and honest, quickly went viral because it was so true to Robert. Not a single act, play, or fakery. It wasn't just his looks that made Robert Smith a pop culture hero. In the 1980s and 1990s, his face was on t-shirts, signs, tattoos, and magazine covers. The fashion world used to make fun of his look, but now it's admired as a sign of nonconformity and rebellion through silence. His musical impact isn't just the tens of millions of albums that have been sold. It's also the lives of people who used to think they were alone. There is the same Deep Water and Lullaby, Pictures of You. People saw themselves, their memories that they didn't name, and their unsolved questions in you. And no one cares about genre, trends, or technique when people sing along with him at these late-night shows. They sing because those songs brought them together when things were bad. As a result, calling Robert Smith an artist is not sufficient. A lyricist gives words to those who can't speak for themselves. One live example of how different people can be loved. Something to tell you that you can still make the world a better place even if you are sad. Nowadays life. Robert Smith is older now than he was before. The hair that used to be all over the place is now graying and thin, but he doesn't change how it looks. That he never gave up on being who he really is. Ink lines his eyes in black, and he still wears clothes that are too big on him and shoes that are worn out. His eyes aren't as angry and rebellious as they used to be. They're now quiet and observant, as if he's seen, heard, and understood enough. After being quiet for more than 16 years, The Cure came back in 2024 with Songs of a Lost World, a new musical trip that was still full of longing, loneliness, and unanswered questions. It got good reviews from critics. It was real, not because it went global, and fans loved it like a gift. Robert's music still sounds like a handwritten journal with smudged ink that has never been polished for show in a time when most fame is based on algorithms and carefully chosen images. Robert has said in the past that he might stop playing music in 2029, which is the 50th anniversary of The Cure's first record. Anytime that goodbye comes, it won't be loud. There was no big goodbye tour or dramatic news release. If there's anything, it will be a small stage with some old songs playing in the background as the lights go out. He's pretty much invisible when he's not making songs. There would be no social media, TV shows, or podcasts about old times. He lives in an old house in Sussex with his wife, Mary. She is the only woman he has ever publicly loved. They have cats and take care of their yard. Robert still writes sometimes, but not to let go. He does it to hold on to parts of himself that he has never given away. A lot of people look up to Robert Smith. To himself, he might not have tried to be anything particular. He is a man, honest, quiet, loyal, and lonely, who chose to show his pain through music instead of words. And that helped him save a lot of money. Not every musician makes music that lasts forever. It wasn't a plan that got Robert Smith what he wanted, it was integrity. Additionally, he might not require a goodbye after all this. Robert is still there in the notes, the darkness, and the people who used to feel like they didn't fit anywhere when Love Song, Disintegration, or A Forest is played. People will always remember Robert Smith, not just for the songs that made history, but also for being himself for almost 50 years in a world that was always screaming. A man of peace, strength, kindness, and depth who turned loneliness into art and gave millions of lost souls a safe place to stay in the dark. He was already great before he made noise. Robert Smith doesn't just leave behind music. Being loved for who you are shows that you can be yourself and still be loved. How do you feel about Robert Smith's journey? Which one of his songs are you still thinking about? Include it in the comments below. Every music memory is important to this story. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next trip, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We will be telling real stories about real people who lived, who hurt, and who left behind something unforgettable. Thank you for seeing this. Keep watching the next movie. Thanks for coming.